Elden Ring Nightreign's DLC has brought with it a new host of bosses, admittedly underwhelming in their quantity, but how does the quality of these encounters stack up and compare to the rest of the base game and the rest of the Souls series? I can only give you my subjective opinion, but I assume you are aware of that when you click this video. Same as my original Nightreign boss ranking, I'll be including the Night Lords as well as any night bosses that offer significant changes from their original fight, but no field bosses will be ranked. That aside, let's discuss the weakest of the pack. I actually rather liked some of these more creative blends of enemies Nightreign used as the night bosses in the base game. Fights like Tree Sentinel and Royal Cavalrymen are just really unique, but while this is similarly unique, the mechanics unfortunately don't pull their weight. They're two of the toughest enemies from Shadow of the Erdtree, with the Divine Warriors in contention for the hardest in the series. Both these bosses are incredibly aggressive, unrelenting, with extremely long combos that dish out equally extreme damage. The best strategy here is to focus the Curse Blade and shred its flimsy health pool as quickly as possible. Fail to do that and you're almost certain to get overwhelmed by the ceaseless aggression of the pair. I just wish they paired the Divine Warrior with another enemy that differed from it more significantly. While the original Lord of Blood was a really solid fight from Elden Ring's base game, this rehash completely lets it down. As with his brother the Fell Omen, who was a massive step down from Morgott, this fight loses a lot by virtue of being a less significant encounter with a boss we've already fought. To their credit, they do add some new mechanics, much like Nightreign's Fell Omen did, but where those added to that fight, the changes made here are only detrimental to the experience. The tridents the Lord summons just have far too much health, and destroying them feels largely pointless anyway, since he just summons more the moment you do end up getting rid of one. It's just such a step down from the original fight. I am not a fan at all. The Death Knight is one of the best mini-bosses from Shadow of the Erdtree, but after beating the first boss, I definitely felt like, damn, that was too easy. But of course that wasn't the end of the night, and FromSoft dropped 3 more knights in to avenge their fallen comrade. They gel reasonably well together for 3 regular enemies mindlessly dumped into a boss fight together. The fight works thanks to Nightreign's free-player oriented gameplay, but it's definitely not as engaging as the rest of the bosses higher up on the list. It's just fine. The first returning boss players will encounter as part of this DLC is yet another example of a boss from Dark Souls being brought back for a much lesser fight. The demon duo aren't anywhere close to as good here as they are in the Ring City. It's just a pretty boring battle now. There's no concern of managing aggro since they have to split their attention between 3 players. There's no real decision making at play. You just pick one at the fight's inception and keep attacking that same demon until the fight's over. It's not bad by any means. The original boss was thankfully really good, but here they're lacking a second phase and overall just don't work anywhere close to as well. We've just discussed the first phase of this fight that takes place on night 1, and now it's time to talk about the Demon Prince. While the duo didn't do much in the way of switching up the mechanics of that encounter, this fight does actually offer some new mechanics, such as the double grab attack. It spices up the original Demon Prince slightly. I still don't think it's anywhere near as enjoyable as that classic fight, but it's at least a slightly more engaging encounter than the night 1 duo. This boss serves as a tutorial of sorts, an introduction to the DLC, and it's pretty solid at that. He does feel very basic, his movement isn't anything massively complex, but if you're a regular of this channel, you'll know I never let simplicity restrict a boss being renowned as great in my rankings. Just ask Udex Gundyr. The moves he does have are all really good. His sweeping melee strikes feel similar in a lot of ways to the melee attacks of Libra, though I definitely prefer them here. His AoE has a very clear tell and is incredibly fair to the player, much more so than AoEs typically tend to be in these games. His visual design is also top-notch, as are those of all of Nightreign's bosses. Having this be the player's introduction to the new characters is awesome as well. Their inclusion in the fight is a great touch. Much like Demon Souls' Vanguard Demon, you don't get to rematch this boss if you die to him, at least not as far as I'm aware, but he definitely fills this role much better, and provides a more solid mechanical challenge. Thankfully I managed to defeat him, but I did hear from my friends that they both got one-shot by his attacks, which is annoying and not something I'm typically a fan of. I'll definitely need to fight him more to flesh out my opinion on this boss, but as it stands, I'm a massive fan. Unlike most of the other bosses Nightreign revives from Dark Souls, Artorias feels like a completely different fight, and has some really solid changes made. He was already the best boss in DS1, he's in my top 5 in the series, so seeing him back for this DLC was great. The encounter kicks off with an excellent entrance, seeing him drop down on some regular enemies just as he did back in that classic cutscene. Much of his old moveset is intact, with the front flips, thrusts, and melee slashes remaining, but he gains so much more depth to his kit to make him work better with Nightreign's drastically different combat. He gets an insane new melee combo in line with many of the bosses of newer Souls games. His phase transition now can't be interrupted and summons tracking humanities like in the fight with Midir. I'll definitely admit, this fight isn't nearly as enjoyable as the original, but it actually gels surprisingly well with Nightreign's free player oriented combat, and it's easily the best night boss in the game. The Balancers are the Night Lord you'll face at the end of the DLC's first expedition, and they're one of the better ganks FromSoft have designed. As all the Night Lords do, their encounter carries immense spectacle. It definitely feels like one of the grandest fights in the series. It truly does feel like you're fighting an army. Individually, the Valkyries' attacks are all really fun to avoid. They have really smooth melee combos and some solid ranged AoEs similar to those used by Elden Ring's Cleanrock Knights. When the pink Valkyrie arrives to the fight in the second phase, it has the best moveset of them all, with some really engaging new combos and moves. The gank is well balanced, there's clear visual and audio cues to clarify when you're about to get attacked by an enemy you may not be focused on. Their aggression is just managed much better than most ganks in the Souls series. But I do have one issue with this fight, a pretty major one. I love that initial resurrection of the angels that kicks off the second phase, but seeing the same happen again, I was disappointed. I don't think the second resurrection really adds anything to the fight, aside from some extra difficulty. I appreciate when FromSoft makes a boss difficult, but I'm not really a fan of when they do so by simply bumping up the numbers on a boss's stats. The encounter is just so long. It's an endurance fight in all regards. For the first two phases, that's fun, but when the angels return to life a second time, it just loses weight. If they'd actually gained some new moves or mechanics here, I would have been fine with it, but no, it's the exact same as the first. I'm not a fan, it just makes the fight feel like it outstays its welcome. While that doesn't take away from the early stages of the encounter, at the end of a 45-minute run, I'm not really looking to be graced with a boss that has far more health than it should. The final boss of the DLC and the face of the expansion, Straghest is definitely its best boss, and one of the better Night Lords in the game. All of its melee attacks provide clear tells and feel great to interact with. They're punishing but fair, weighty but smooth, they're everything you want in an enemy of this bestial nature. His design is almost like a rotten reskin of Manus, while his movements feel very akin to those of Gale's first phase. I really like everything he offers, and as I said in the tutorial fights entry, he actually has a really good AoE. In phase 2 the fight takes on an entirely new level of spectacle, as Straghest leaps from pillars of corpses to perform sweeping drive-by attacks that every Night Lord seems to possess. If it was just his melee elements, I'd love the fight. Hell, even the projectiles he tosses at you or uses to create AoEs are really good. Unfortunately, the Dreadlord commits one of the cardinal sins of boss design. Why would they dump ads in the boss arena? Just why? There was no need, they add nothing to the fight. Ads never add anything to a boss. They always, nearly without fail, make it worse. So why try to break the cycle? Everyone else who does fails. Thankfully, this is one of the least offensive examples of this crime, but that's only because the ads don't actually pose any real threat to you. Even more reason not to have included them. Players still end up just engaging with the Dreadlord himself. The ads weaken what's otherwise a really solid fight, which is such a disappointment to see when FromSoft was so close to giving us an excellent beast fight, a style they typically struggle with. So those were all the unique new bosses from the Forsaken Hollows DLC ranked from worst to best. As always, I'm eager to hear your thoughts on these fights and the DLC as a whole. Just remember to keep it respectful when leaving a comment down below. I hope you've enjoyed this video and might stick around for those to come in the future.